Now, in Southern California, we have a huge number of Korean immigrants who were Presbyterians, came to this country. There were something like 500,000 Koreans in Southern California, and a large percentage of them are Presbyterian. And one of the decisions they made when they came here was that for the older folks, they would continue to have their worship services in the Korean language. And their services are a fairly traditional American Presbyterian worship service. And that then they would have English language services for their children. And so in the American Korean Presbyterian churches, children are removed from the family at a very young age in church to go to services in English while their parents go to services in Korean. Now, it's an understandable decision, but it's a decision that ripped the covenant family apart. And while the Korean service was fairly traditionally Presbyterian, the English service was radically Pentecostal in terms of music and in terms of a lot of style of preaching. And what was communicated? That the piety of the parents was just old-fashioned, old country, irrelevant to young people. And then you see we come back to the pragmatic test and the pragmatic question. How has this worked out? All the statistics indicate that 95%, 98% in some polls, of Korean American Presbyterian young people after college leave the church. 95 to 98% leave the Korean American church. Now, they may go to some other church. This is a colossal failure by any pragmatic standard. And I think we have to learn from these experiences and say, what are we going to do with our young people? Now, I think one of the great heritages of the Dutch Reformed churches is to say children worship with their parents in church. We don't segregate them by age. So that from the very youngest years, they are absorbing in ways that we may not even fully grasp the worship service. I remember vividly one of my sons, when he was 5 years old, answering the door on a Sunday afternoon. A neighbor across the street said, "Can you come out and play?" And my son said, "Well, I don't think so. Where's our other neighbor that we usually play with?" "Well, I think he's gone to the store with his mother Sunday afternoon." My 5-year-old's eyes got big. He said, "Boy, is he in trouble." And the little boy who was across the street, unchurched, said, "Why's that?" And my son said, "Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work, but the seventh is a Sabbath unto the Lord thy God. In it thou shalt not do it." The whole commandment. I had no idea he'd memorized the 10 Commandments. I'd made no effort to have him memorize the 10 Commandments. He'd heard them every Sunday morning in church. Read from Exodus 20. Sometimes I've heard it said, often I've heard it said, well, isn't that kind of a vain repetition? There's nothing better for kids than vain repetition. Not vain, but repetition. And they absorb so much more than we imagine or understand. But we have to focus, you see, creative, thoughtfully on this question. How do we pass the faith down through the generations? And I don't think it's by segregating them out or by subtly communicating that what's going on in church is somehow irrelevant or doesn't apply to them or isn't important.